Hello and welcome to The Arise interview. 60 glorious minutes of multifaceted discussion where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things, and we feature the voices at the heart of the stories. I'm Charles Anyekolo. Coming up in the next hour, the man who founded one of Nigeria's biggest churches and who is alleged to have raped the wife of a prominent Nigerian celebrity has been forced to step down from his post as senior pastor of the COZA Church following widespread protests calling for him to be removed. So what happens next? Will there be an official police investigation? We'll hear from protesters, lawyers and politicians in a moment. Now, the man who founded one of Nigeria's biggest churches, the Commonwealth of Zion Assembly, or COZA, has been forced to relinquish his post as senior pastor after being accused of some of the most serious crimes. Pastor Biodun Fatoyinbo is alleged by a celebrity woman who is the wife of a prominent Nigerian musician to have engaged in an act of sexual violence against her. Busola Dakolo, who's a photographer and wife of the popular singer Timi Dakolo, accused the pastor of raping her 20 years ago when she was just about to turn 18. She's gone public, detailing the nature of the allegations against Pastor Fatoyinbo. And this week, there have been protests on the streets of Abuja and Lagos by civil society groups and many celebrities, as well as ordinary people, demanding an investigation. But many others have also defended the pastor, who has denied the allegation. They say he is God-fearing and has nothing but respect for Nigerian women. Well, in a moment, we'll speak to various sides in this disturbing issue. But first, here is how it all came to light when the alleged victim, Busola Dakolo, spoke about the alleged incident in this interview.
I had the knock. Who is that? Pastor Biodun. I was first of all like, I couldn't say anything, like, what's this time? So early? But immediately I just opened the door. He just pushed me. He didn't say anything. He didn't utter any word. He just pushed me to one of the chairs in my living room, and I saw him like he was removing his belt. So I was like, what? He just said, keep quiet, do what I want you to do, and you'll be fine. So at this point, really, a whole lot was just going on in my head, because it was more like someone that I had put up here that I felt was really, really concerned about me. I had already felt him in the place of like a father that could speak to me, guide me. He was there about to do something I did not believe. And then when I was just about to react, he just covered my mouth. And when he covered my mouth, I was just like, Busola, listen to me and you'll be fine. Just do what I want you to do. I didn't struggle. I just left him, and he brought out his pennies, and I was wearing a nice gown. I was wearing pants, pulled down my pants, and that was how he found difficulty to enter, but he just kept, I was like grunting, I would cry, I was just doing a whole lot of mixed feelings and all that, and he eventually penetrated, even blood dropped on the floor.
And that's the alleged victim there, Busola Dakolo, and you have to excuse the rather graphic nature of that interview, but it's obviously very important to understand the context that all this took place in. Well, for more on this, let's speak now to Olamide Apejoye, who is a public relations consultant and girls' rights activist and was one of those at the protests against the COZA pastor, and Franklin Olukemi, a legal practitioner, human rights lawyer and member of the Coalition of Public Interest Lawyers and Advocates. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. I'll start with you.
Thank you.
Olamide, what exactly are you protesting against? Is it the specific case against this Pastor Biodun, or is it rape in general, which you believe is prevalent in Nigeria in various contexts beyond just this particular pastor and church?
Both, really, but this prompted us to just say enough is enough. Rape is an epidemic. About 2 months ago, women were picked up, labeled prostitutes, and rounded up and beaten and tortured. And we also...
This was in Abuja?
This was here in Abuja, and we also, protested to the police headquarters here in Abuja. And of course, this came, and this, I must start by saying that this is not just about Pastor Biodun Fatoyinbo, this is about every other religious leader in Nigeria who have been perpetrators of this act. And it has been covered up because, I mean, that's our culture, or Nigeria just, allows people to just shield themselves and not speak out, because first of all, I must start by saying that our laws are too rigid. And so far, I think just only about 18 cases of rape has been successfully achieved in Nigeria, and that's unfortunate because, matter of factly, 1 in every 3 girls has an experience of sexual assault or rape. So that's
an astonishingly high number.
Yes, it is, because even at the protest, we actually asked people to tell their stories. Like, how many people here, how many women here can testify to the fact that you have been raped or sexually assaulted? And if we're 100 women, 95 raised up their hands to say, you know what, I have experienced sexual assault. So we're saying enough is enough, and we're saying, you know what, we want justice to be served. We do not even care how long it's going to take, but it must happen.
No, I think you're absolutely right. If those figures are correct, then it is an epidemic.
Yes.
But let's talk about the specific case that has become the sort of agent provocateur to all of this. How did that come about? Because there have been rumors and past allegations against Pastor Fatoyinbo that he was using young women, and I emphasize that those are allegations.
Absolutely. I think in 2009 there was, I'm not sure, but I think in 2009 S.A. Walters came up to tell her story, and she recounted her experience with this particular pastor, and again he was shut up, and he said that he was going to give a robust response, but we didn't hear anything about it. Well, because this was different. This was, of course, like you said, a celebrity's wife, and there was a major interview that broke the internet. He then decided to say something, which really and truly he hasn't really, said. So we're saying that enough is enough. This time around, I think he must answer.
But let me ask you this. Those who support and defend the pastor, and there are many of them, say these are all lies and a smear campaign, that he's a respectable, God-fearing man who has led his church piously and who respects women. But you disagree with that?
Absolutely. The question is why? Is he the only pastor? There are bigger pastors than he. He's way before he was born, now and even after. So why him? Why? I mean, I'll leave, other stories that we've heard from minors, even from these same pastors, but obviously we cannot say that because we're trying to protect their interest and them as human beings. So we're not going to talk about that. We're going to say, why is he the only one? Why? There are other pastors in Nigeria, there are other religious leaders, of course, who also have been hiding, and because some people die with their stories. Some young girls, because they're afraid to say their story, they're afraid to come out. But people are saying that I'm tired of, like Busola Dakolo said, the little girl in me is ready to speak. The little girl in me is no longer afraid of you, because if you listen to, there's a pattern. If you listen to all these women, there's a way he manipulates them. He makes them sure that he makes them afraid. He kind of subtle threats and all of that. It's something that want to run away from. But we're happy that they're now courageous to come out in numbers, and we've been working with Stand to End Rape Initiative also, and underground, saying that if you have stories, tell us so that we can compile this, and when the case is in court, we can then of course have corroborating stories.
Okay, let me bring in Franklin Olukemi, who's a legal practitioner, a human rights lawyer. I suppose the legal question is how much of this is rumor and tittle-tattle, and how much can be proved in a court of law?
Well, yes, see, there's a law, and then there is morality. Now, rape is condemned both at law and at morality. And in order for us to establish rape in court, it takes a lot of work, because the court of law is a court of evidence. So you must actually establish with evidence for the court. The judge is just sitting there. It's not omnipresent. He doesn't see everything going on in the whole world. So you have to bring the evidence for him, and he will then decide on what is before him. Now, in the case of rape, there is a need for what you call a corroborative evidence. That is, someone that must have seen that act occur, if an eyewitness testimony, or a medical test, that shows some level of deposits from the rapist. I mean, in terms of semen or whatever it is.
DNA,
yes,
all that sort of thing.
Those deposits, even if it's the hair from the body, can be picked up and checked for the DNA of the person to pin the offense on the offender. So these are necessary things. Now we're looking at an offense that has been committed for over a decade.
20 years ago.
20 years ago. It's going to be very difficult for the court to establish the guilt of the accused or the defendant in this type of case. However, it's not just about establishing the guilt. It's also about establishing innocence. If you have been accused of such an offense of such severity, such as rape, we're happy to learn that the pastor has stepped down from, being the senior pastor of the church at the moment. We would advise that he proceeds to, make himself available for investigations. If not just for the justice of Mrs. Busayo, also for his own good, to clear his name.
Okay, let me ask you to hold it there, because we've got to take a short break, but we'll keep talking about this. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as a storm of protests continues to rage around the senior pastor at the COZA Church following allegations of rape. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview, where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things around the world and featuring the voices at the heart of the stories. I'm Charles Anyagola. Now, if you've been keeping across social media and television news channels like Arise News, you'll know that the latest scandal to engulf the founder of the Commonwealth of Zion Assembly, or COZA Church, Pastor Biodun Fatoyinbo, has dominated discussion in Nigeria. There have been protests across the country calling for an investigation into allegations that he raped a teenage girl. He's now been forced to step down from his role as senior pastor at the church. But equally, there have been many insisting that Pastor Biodun is innocent of the accusations leveled against him. There's been tight security around the expansive COZA Church compounds in Abuja and Lagos. At one stage during yesterday's protests, demonstrators attempted to charge the buildings but were repelled by a combined force of police, army and members of the Civil Defense Corps. In a moment, we'll chat more with our guests about both the protests and the allegations. But first, here's more from the alleged victim, Busola Dakolo, speaking about the alleged rape incident on television.
Something that just happened, like an event, but a whole lot are damaged within me. As in, I don't even know how to define it, a whole lot. He entered his car. All I saw was he came back and he brought Crest.
What is Crest? Toothpaste?
No, a drink then.
Mouthwash?
No, a drink.
Like a soft drink?
Yeah, like a soft drink.
Right.
It was Crest. It had green contents.
Right. I do remember. I think I remember Crest.
Yeah,
yes.
so it was already opened.
Right.
He had opened it and he just poured it in my mouth.
Why? I mean,
I don't know. So he poured it in my mouth and I had to just be swallowing it as he was pouring, swallowing it. And he finished and he was now tapping me like, you should be happy I'm the one that did this to you.
That's the alleged rape victim there, Busola Dakolo, speaking about the incident on television. Let's continue our chat now with Olamide Apejoye, a public relations consultant and girls' rights activist, who was one of those at the protests against the COZA pastor, and with Franklin Olukemi, a legal practitioner, human rights lawyer, and member of the Coalition of Public Interest Lawyers and Advocates. Thank you for staying with us. And let me start with you. Beyond these women who are making these allegations themselves? Are there any witnesses or insiders who have come out to support their allegations, either from within the COZA Church or who were around them at the time this was happening, that you're aware of?
Yes. So at the rally yesterday, a young man who was really, really passionate about the protest said he defiled his sister, so he was there to lend his voice also, because sister is also a victim of this same pastor, so he was there. So yes, we do. And also her family members have also said that, you know, they're aware of it, and apparently at the time in Ilorin, he threatened their family to keep mute after the incidents happened. So there are people that, you know, witnesses, family members, you know, just friends that are aware of these allegations against this pastor. So it's not just, there's a lot of witnesses.
Right, as we mentioned, and we will have to keep emphatically saying this, it is obviously important to state at this stage that these are simply allegations,
yes,
that
so
Pastor
alleged.
Fatoyinbo and his supporters have denied them and called them smear campaigns against a pious, God-fearing man, according to them. How will we, or whoever, be able to test the credibility of these alleged victims?
Well, you see, there's a saying that the court is the last hope of the common man. And justice is a three-way... Yes, and woman, of course. And justice is a three-way street. There's justice to the accused, there's justice to the state, and then justice to the complainant, the victim. So if you're looking at the principle of justice and testing this in court, now, it will be difficult, like I said earlier, to actually prove this particular case. Yeah, except, of course, there's some video evidence or some audio evidence somewhere that can actually come to court. You know, but then, if there's a pattern, a continuous pattern over time, and all these persons are able to come out to say that this happened to me, this happened to me, but then it means it's going to look like some sort of the state now. The burden is on the state.
Right, to prove that case.
Yes,
right.
to prove that case. And the
but
police
could
must
there
do...
be, from what you're saying, from what she's saying,
Yes.
could there be this body of circumstantial evidence? Because that's really what it has to be, isn't it?
Yes.
That could then become, you know, used as some kind of admissibility in a court of law.
Well, that could work, but that does not necessarily mean that it's going to actually secure a conviction.
Right.
Yes, because rape is a felony. It's a very serious offense. And for it to be proven, that's to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yes.
Yes. But then the court has the burden on it to listen to the evidence of the parties and to apply. Now, in the Honorable Justice Roosevelt had said that the criminal law does not necessarily say that it has to prove beyond all shadows of doubt. It just has to prove beyond all reasonable doubt. So even if there are some similitudes or some shadows of doubt somewhere, as long as the doubt that has been established is sufficient to secure a conviction, then you can actually convict.
And sometimes that is why, if it was a trial by jury, you may be more likely to secure a conviction for the simple reason that these are ordinary men and women. And whereas in such a country like Nigeria, there are no juries, and therefore it is a judge who is practiced in the art and knowledge of law.
Yes, that's true. But you know, I think that's true. There's also the issue of the judge actually vectoring the decision of the jury
and giving specific instructions about what you can and cannot do.
Yes, because in a case like rape, like under the Violence Against Person Prohibition Act of Nigeria, which is applicable here in Abuja, it is the punishment is very, very strict. It's life imprisonment. So you cannot say that you want to just send someone to prison for life over evidence that they're not substantial enough. So in as much, but my point and the point we're trying to make here is this: right now, Pastor Fatoyinbo has a presumption of innocence by reason of his constitutional rights. So it's presumed that he's innocent. But then he also has what we call a sacred trust by reason of his position.
Yeah, of course.
So this also places some burden on him
to make himself available.
Yes.
Okay, let me bring you in. Because you said that initially, at the outset, when we started talking, that you believe Busola Dakolo.
Yes.
Internationally, of course, the instinct for most anti-rape organizations is to believe a woman who says she's been raped, because the truth is that it is so difficult to speak out about sexual violence. So when a woman has the strength to come out to tackle or to talk about it, the inclination is to err on her side, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yes.
But that, even though that instinct to believe the woman is understandable, sadly, it is no proof of rape, is it?
No, it's not a proof of rape, but I mean, one must be, like you said, it takes a lot to come and give a detailed narration of your experience.
Right.
And more so because she recounted, lost her virginity through that,
Yeah, she talks about blood and,
Yes.
stuff.
It was
being
her
on the
first
floor.
time, and I believe, and a lot of Nigerians, of course, also, it takes a lot for a woman to, or anyone.
Yeah, no,
even-
I understand
even
that.
boys
And I have
come
to be
out and tell their
honest,
stories.
without prejudice to Pastor Biodun, just watching that interview, there is just something commandingly believable about the young woman there. But again, that's no
Uncontrollable.
proof. But let me ask you this again, the strict letter of the law. How plausible is it, listening to the story told by Busola Dakolo, how plausible is it that someone knocks on your door early in the morning and without knowing who is at home, pushes you down onto the sofa, rapes you, then goes out, buys you a soft drink, still not knowing who's in the house, who might have, whether she called the police, buys you a soft drink, then comes back to the same house, feeds you the soft drink, then goes away? I mean, is there an element of incredibility and incredulity to that from the point of view of a court of law?
Yes, you see, that was actually the issue, the problem that I had with that case, with that story. You see, it is just, it was like a movie. I mean, with all due respect to Mrs. Dakolo, the court would be reluctant to accept such a story.
To convict someone
Yes.
based on that sort of
Yes,
evidence.
yes, because, this is someone that doesn't live in your house, comes in, sees you, rapes you, goes out. But then, you see, the truth is, every case of rape has its own special, peculiarities. And it
Because,
is
of course,
not-
the woman could have been traumatized by the experience and
yes.
just absolutely so shocked that she couldn't utter a word.
True. Considering that it's not an absolute stranger, this is someone she knows. Maybe when he came in, she didn't think he was going to do anything like that. So really, like I said, the judge is not going to be God who sees all things. He's going to be deciding on what is in front of him. Yeah. So the court might not, I'm not saying that this is going to go this way or that way. The court a lot of times acts on discretion and acts on public policy and all of that. But then there's an underlying rule in the criminal justice system that it is better for you to, set free 9 guilty persons than to convict one innocent person.
Yeah, that is true.
It defeats the OSS of the criminal justice system.
We've got less than a minute to go. Okay. A final word from you. What's the next step? Because you're clearly determined, along with other protesters, to secure, at the very least, an investigation.
The next step is to, we also intend to protest to the police headquarters to have them invite him in for investigation. And to also, we've also even said earlier today in our meeting, is to say, you know what, let's even say that our laws are rigid. We do not care if it takes us 5 years for us to mend these laws. And thank God we already have new lawmakers in the House. Let's see if they can, help us carry this burden and change certain rigidity of the law when it comes as regards to rape and sexual assault in general. So we're willing to go not just from the police aspect, also from our lawmakers.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you, Olamide Apejoye, and of course, Franklin Olukemi. Thank you very much indeed to both of you for coming in. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as protests continue around the senior pastor at the COZA Church following allegations of rape. We'll speak to a young politician and former presidential candidate about how he thinks the incident is being handled. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview, where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things around the world and featuring the voices at the heart of the stories. I'm Charles Anyegolu. Now, as you may already know, the man who founded one of Nigeria's biggest churches, the Commonwealth of Zion Assembly, or COZA, is being accused of rape. Pastor Biodun Fatoyinbo is alleged to have raped Busola Dakolo, the wife of a celebrity musician, Timmy Dakolo, some 20 years ago when she was just turning 18. Pastor Biodun has denied the charges, has since been forced to temporarily step down from his position as senior pastor at the COZA Church amid strident calls for an investigation. The Christian Association of Nigeria, or CAN, which is the umbrella organization representing the country's churches, has condemned any act of rape as reprehensible and ungodly, but says it has no details on the allegations against Pastor Biodun. But still, the storm of protests continued to rage. Here are some of the demonstrators insisting on an official investigation.
We will be marching to the relevant law enforcement, judicial, and law-making bodies to stress the importance of ensuring that rape and other forms of sexual abuse will no longer be tolerated. Yes. We will not stop until justice for sexual abuse victims is taken seriously and addressed in Nigeria.
Well, politicians of all stripes in Nigeria have been reacting to the rape allegations against Pastor Biodun. Among them is the young politician and former presidential candidate Ahmed Buhari, who used to be a member of the Sustainable National Party but is now with the ruling APC party. And he joins me now in the studio. Thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Good to be here, Charles.
What do you make of these rape allegations against Pastor Fatoyinbo?
It's sad. I mean, hearing Busola's story is really heartbreaking. But again, what I want people to understand is this is not just about Pastor Biodun Fatoyinbo. It's not just about religious leaders across board, whether from the Muslim perspective or the Christian perspective, because across board, men have been found wanting when it comes to taking advantage of the weaker sex, as the case may be. And it's because of the society that we live in, forget whether it's about Nigeria, even in other societies, this is one thing that women find very hard to express when they go through the trauma, when they go through the process. And what I think we should be doing with Busola's story is not just about wanting to ensure that Pastor Fatoyinbo is being nailed or being locked up or being found culpable of this act. I think it's more about raising the awareness and getting more women to know their rights and how to express it. Also about how the people must understand that public prosecution sometimes does not take you to your destination, and we must be concerned about how we want to gather evidences to really find this pastor wanting. Otherwise, it will just be social media discussions and media public opinions, and it will go and phase out. But for me, fundamentally, I think for Busola to be coming out 20 years after, it goes to show that this is one thing that has been bothering her mind all these years, and her ability to now do this, bearing in mind that Busola is married, happily married. She's got beautiful children. She's in the society of the comfort.
She's a celebrity.
She's a celebrity, yes.
And her husband is a celebrity.
Exactly. So we're not seeing her trying to extort anything from this pastor. We're not seeing her trying to make any name for herself. So very clearly, it's about a human being who is trying to find some resolve within herself. And I think she needs all the encouragement. And with regards to the story and whether it adds up or not, like the former lawyer, the lawyer who was on seat said, every case with regards to rape has its own peculiarities. How it happens, how it finished, it's peculiar to that situation. So again, I think it's an interesting time where the lawmakers should also try and beef up to, ensure that there's some laws that would make these acts an act that people know if they get involved, they're going to be locked up.
Is there much discussion in the political parties about this incident?
Yeah, again, because it's because of the way it has come to the limelight, it's going to be talked about at the beer parlor level. Until the matter is able to be...
It's a sort of a tabloid story,
yes,
isn't
it's sort of a tabloid story, so it's going to be talked about on that level. But if you do see it move to the next phase, which of course has to do with a court or with some evidences erupting, you will see the politicians take it very seriously, especially from the perspective of the National Assembly, trying to find how best our laws can be, readdressed to sort of protect not just women, not just men, not just children, but everybody.
Is there a lesson in all of this in the deification of religious figures in Nigeria, where they become so revered that people forget they're human and think of them as God's anointed who can do no wrong? It's
one of our biggest problems. You talk about a pastor and people say, touch not my anointed. And if you talk about a malam and people try to lynch you because you're trying to talk about a malam, and people see them as figures, untouchables. But what we forget is that they're made of flesh and blood and they're bound to err. And so when we know these things, we must be able to remind them at every time that your responsibility is to share a message, but by no means should you think you're larger than man and you're not God. This must be reminded to the followers, this must be reminded to the supposed religious leaders. And like I said earlier, this is, with the statistics that the speaker before me did deliver, yes, these things are happening every day. Father to daughter, uncle to niece, teacher to students. So we need to be serious about it. We need to make sure we do not think it's a religious situation. We must disassociate Pastor Fatoyinbo from the church, understanding that with an individual that is being accused, and the reply shouldn't be coming from the church, but from the individual.
That's a good point.
So that we are clear on what we are dealing with. Otherwise, like we are in this country, emotions and sentiments will start interfering with our reasoning.
Do you think if this had happened before the elections, it would have become a big issue during the elections?
I do not see how it connects, because Pastor Fatoyinbo, as much as I know, has not really...
Well, these statistics you're talking about, that the young lady was talking about, the number of rape victims in the country, according to their statistics, that's more than enough to cause serious concern.
Any politician that probably would have used it as one of his major issues would have probably been paid more attention. But you see, the society isn't still developed as much as we want it to be developed enough to say, you know what, this is an issue we should trash, especially when most of these rape perpetrators are actually top shots in the society, highly respected people in the society. So the only times you see a rapist being paraded or being talked about is when he is a poor person. So an uncle who was sitting down with his niece in the house, raped her, and then we take it up and we tear him apart. Sometimes he gets killed before he even reaches the police station.
Yes.
Now we need to go beyond that and start focusing more on how do we gather the evidences. From the Islamic perspective, when a case has been reported like this, you need 4 witnesses. One must be coming from this part, and this part, and all of them do not have to know each other. And they will all have to attest to the fact that this was something they saw happen. So it's really, like the lawyer said, it's a really difficult thing for the court of law to establish, especially when evidences are sketchy.
And of course, beyond our almost natural human instinct to sympathize with an alleged victim,
exactly,
we should also note that Pastor Fatoyinbo and his supporters have repeatedly said he's innocent.
Right.
And also, he himself has not spoken out really in his own defense.
Exactly.
Given the full story from his perspective, that would help, wouldn't it?
It would, and then we will know what we're really dealing with. Because at the end of the day, we've seen some people who just got released after 40 years in prison for wrongfully accused of rape.
Absolutely.
So these cases are there, and so we must be very careful. We must become a people that take logical reasoning before emotions and sentiments and all of the things that society throws at us without any proper alignment.
Okay, we're talking to the politician, Ahmed Buhari. We've still got a bit of time, because I will at some point want to talk to you about political developments in the country. But there is still a mood right now in Nigeria that seems to be leaning towards guilt on the part of this pastor, which, as we pointed out, technically speaking, is not fair, because I mean, he hasn't been found guilty by a court of law.
Yes.
But it's almost traditional that in circumstances like this, particularly when there's a vulnerable woman involved, and when we think back to her when she was just 17, I mean, she was still technically a minor.
True.
Turning 18, and this sort of absolutely horrendous thing happened to her. Our sort of inclination is to err on her side, but that's not
generally the case.
That's not the right way to do it.
Absolutely. So again, this is us developing and evolving. 20 years ago, no woman would come out publicly to talk about being a rape victim. So it means that we're actually developing, we're actually growing as a people, as a society, understanding that some of these things have got to be talked about, because whatever it is that Busayo is doing, the caller is doing right now with regards to expressing or trying to release herself from whatever lock she's been in all these years, it just goes to show that more women will be able to speak up.
Yeah,
and we will start identifying those people in our society who need help.
And of course, what raises the ante,
yes,
for those who are supporting Busola Dakolo is that they've now been, as the young lady who was here earlier said, multiple allegations against the pastor, not just from Busola herself, but from a whole host of others. Does that, in your assessment, strengthen the probability of guilt against the pastor, not so much from a legal, but from a human perspective?
Yeah, well, you know, it'd be very, very unfair for me to go from the human perspective, because I'm human, I've got emotions, I've got sentiments. Just listening to her story, Mrs. Dakolo's story, you just want to side with her, because this is not the first time I've heard about the similar allegation against this pastor, but this is getting serious because of the individual and the level the individual occupies in the society. However, it is very, very important for us to understand that we've had some people in other crimes who have been repeatedly accused of a particular kind of heinous act, and the court doesn't find them wanting.
Yeah, okay. Just stay with us. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead, including we'll hear about a parliamentary petition in the UK calling for those suspected of sexual offences to be given anonymity until they are charged, should that become the practice in places like Nigeria. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview, where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things around the world and featuring the voices at the heart of the stories. I'm Charles Anyegolu. Now, in the UK, the music legend Sir Cliff Richard is speaking today at the launch of a parliamentary petition calling for those suspected of sexual offences to be given anonymity until they are charged by police. The famous London-based international broadcaster Paul Gambaccini is supporting the campaign. He was accused of sexually assaulting 2 teenage boys, claims which were later dropped because in his case he apparently didn't even know these 2 people. He said that apart from the case being dragged out, what made it worse was that it was widely publicized and he was in effect found guilty in the media despite his innocence. So should what they're trying to do in the UK, where suspected sexual offenders are given anonymity until they are charged, also be looked at critically in places like Nigeria? with a view to becoming regular practice in this country. Well, with me in the studio is the young politician and former presidential candidate, Ahmed Buhari, who used to be a member of the Sustainable National Party, but is now with the ruling APC party. Thank you for staying with us.
Thank you.
What do you think of that, then?
You see, this is why I want Nigerians to understand that it's a process. You know, this is a democracy in a supposed first world country, and the laws are still being checked. It's being revised, it's evolving. We're now seeing that some people who are actually innocent are being tried by the media, being tried by the public opinion, and at the end of the day, they may never become the same people anymore. As much as those rape victims might be going through trauma, and a forcefully accused person
is also
going through such trauma. So we must be extremely careful, and I do support the notion. However, the fear from a lot of people would be the fact that when these kind of things are going on, the agencies, the security agencies, the courts try to now cover it up for the person, cover the person up, and never let the let society know how much of a crime that individual has committed. But overall, I do think that the anonymity of those individuals should be protected, because we now get to a point where some of these people, after you expose them, even if they're guilty, might actually be be hurt by society even before they've been tried in courts.
And I mean, when you look at the nuances of this particular case, we talked about that earlier, the plausibility, or that someone comes to someone's house without knowing who's in the house.
Yeah, well,
you see what I mean? And knocks on the door, pushes you down onto the sofa and rapes you, and you have no idea who's in the house. Then he goes off, buys a soft drink, comes back, here, have a soft drink,
right,
and then takes off again after that. I mean,
I heard you speak about it like a few minutes ago with the previous commentators, and some people shook their heads in like, you see, we don't like that part of the story. It doesn't add up. It doesn't sit well. But again, we must recognize one thing. From the story that the lady gave, the full story says he was their pastor, he was familiar with the family, he knew when the other members of the family were out of town, he knew if he knocks on that door, who was probably going to open the door. He probably came with a game plan or no game plan, and because of whatever it was at that time, took that, the act and everything. For me, I do think that whatever the case is, we must understand that every rape case has got its peculiarities.
Yes, no, absolutely.
Yes.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's move away slightly from that swirling controversy around Pastor Biodun. Now that we've got you here, a young political buck trying to make your way through the thickets of Nigerian politics. What's it been like for you, a former presidential candidate who's now carpet crossed to the ruling APC party from a relatively unknown political party?
We had a few discussions earlier with a few individuals, and they were like, you cannot be a lamb amongst wolves and still survive. But you see, the thing is, I'm practically new in the political space. Before now, I did participate, did support individuals, exercise my franchise at the polling unit and things like that. But then, 2016, I said I was going to run for office. A relatively new guy, a family man, 9 to 5, that's just about it. But you can see that in that short time, from nothing, with nothing, and I mean from nothing with nothing, no publicity, no resources whatsoever, the type that you need to actually crack the surface, we did make a mark. Which means that we just need more people with similar thoughts agreeing to come together to say, you know what, we are going to start talking about these things from a different perspective. People will listen. People might be a bit reluctant from the beginning, but we just need to keep saying this over and over. And the reason for the cross-carpeting, like you mentioned, was because we need to be honest when it comes to the polity. A lot of young people who want to be who are interested in politics and watch the politics from afar are more concerned about the instant gratification. I put in this effort, I need to see the result now, forgetting that the people you're competing with are people that have been in the media space since 1970. It takes a lot of work to dissuade
and you're prepared to work
which is what
do
we're
the
doing
long
now.
haul.
And if you can see, of all the people that contested alongside me in the 2019 election, practically everybody has gone back to sleep. But see, we must be strategic to ensure that politics it's a process where you must become influential to exert power.
Right. And now you are, of course, in the ruling APC party,
Yes.
which is the center of power in
Right.
Nigeria. The current fight, we understand, within the ruling circles is over Mr. Buhari's new ministerial cabinet. We understand it's been riven by political disagreements and infighting, and that is said to be delaying the release of the president's list. I mean, what light can you shed on that for us?
Of course, we are living in a society where a lot of people are very self-centered. We're living in a society where a lot of people haven't got anything to offer, but then would want to present themselves as the relevant kind of people for those kind of positions. But you know, we have to remember one thing. I still do believe that for Ahmed Buhari, it was never about the ambition. I kept saying that this is a vision, not an ambition, and that's because I do believe that the process it's a long haul. It's not a
Yeah,
dash.
but for Ahmed Buhari,
Yes.
is a ministerial appearing on that list, is a ministerial position something that you would root for, a possible ministerial position, or are you not particularly interested? Because that's an opportunity for you to do what you set out to do, which is serve this country.
Generally, this is exactly what every young person would be praying and hoping for, because again, of all the things that we said, we do need the opportunity to now actualize and present to the people that we do have the capacity to deliver. But you see, the problem is, if you're not given the opportunity, you will never be able to convince the people that you have something to give. So we do hope, like the president kept talking about it from during the end part of the campaigns, I'm going to have young people represented in my administration so that we will start building new people. And the fear I have, forget about myself and my possibility to become a minister in the country, is that we are grooming young people who we are not preparing for leadership. And the time this leadership will befall them, I mean, I do not know how exactly we intend to manage it.
That's a very good point. So is it fair to say that in spite of the fact that you were a presidential candidate in the last election, you remain to some extent on the fringes of the ruling APC party and are simply not privy to what's really going on inside? Without putting you on the spot, but then putting you on the spot there.
So on a serious note, I supported the APC party because at that time I needed to be honest with myself. Myself and my team, I will consider one of the most realistic team in the build-up of 2019 election. We knew very well that we couldn't crack it. We knew very well that it was clear and evident that young people were not going to vote for us. So when you pull out APC and PDP, the rest of the people who contested collectively were unable to raise up to 200,000 votes. This is a shame. This is a disaster. So we needed to form that alliance so that we get the opportunity to let the people know that, look, we've got something to offer. More than anything else, what we did at that time was to say, all our structures, all our people, this is the direction we want to go to. Because I had a prior meeting with the Vice President, Professor Yemi Oshibajo.
Very briefly, we're out of time.
Who was very open to say, give me your policy document, we will find a way to integrate it and see how we can work together as a people for the benefit of the country.
Okay, Ahmed Buhari, former presidential candidate, thank you very much indeed. Well, that's it for this edition of The Arise Interview. Join us again for a fresh edition tomorrow. From me and the entire team here in Abuja, bye-bye, and thank you for watching. Very good.